The end of the Reputation era marked one of the most critical moments in Taylor Swift's career. It was a huge success with 2 top 10 hits, a tour that broke the all-time highest US gross record at the time. It also marked the end of a 12-year relationship with Big Machine Records. By now we all know the masters dispute, but long story short, they refused to sell back her masters at a fair price, leading to Taylor's versions and her departure from that label. In retrospect, a lot was hanging on what would become the Lover era, a time that marked major growth for Swift as both an artist and a public figure. She really found her voice in that era. In this Valentine's Day video essay special, we'll discuss the Lover era's beginnings, the era itself, its legacy and tracks, and dispel the idea that Lover was really a flop era. If anything, I argue that the Lover era was one of the most important periods of her career. Lover is the foundation for the Taylor Swift we have today, the de facto pop queen that has just won her 4th Album of the Year Grammy and is still on her earth-shattering Eras World Tour. The journey to Lover. Towards the end of the Reputation World Tour, Swift was already signaling a big change in how she managed her public image. On October 8, 2018, Taylor Swift defeated the Republican allegations, signaling her support for Democrats in her home state of Tennessee during the 2018 midterm election. Swift had been relatively apolitical up to this point. In a brazen statement, she proclaimed her support for LGBTQ rights and condemned systemic racism and Marsha Blackburn. While her support did not translate to a victory, she successfully got many Swifties to register to vote. When the tour officially wrapped up, Swift announced that she was moving to the Republic Records label. Republic would allow her to own her masters and merely serve as a distributor for her recordings. Working with Republic opened up a new level of freedom for Swift, who began work on Lover immediately. The development of the record was handled mostly by Jack Antonoff and Swift herself. Where Jack had only produced 3 songs on 1989, 6 on Reputation, Jack produced 11 of the 18 tracks on Lover. Taylor Swift herself has production credits on every track, a career first. Other producers included production team Louis Bell and Frank Dukes, peer heroine architect Joel Little, and Soundwave. Annie Clark of St. Vincent famously contributed writing to Cruel Summer, and Brendan Urie co-wrote the lead single Me. In sharp contrast to the more industrial and cold sounds of Reputation, Lover marked a return to grounded acoustic elements. While the songs would mostly adhere to Swift's impeccable song structure, Lover was very experimental for Swift, from a vocal production standpoint to the instruments to genre blending. Lover risked cohesion for a more dynamic and eclectic sound. Jack Antonoff's production continued some of the 80s synth-pop motifs that he developed during 1989. We all know about Cruel Summer, but he contributed the R&B electropop I Think He Knows, which evoked his other collaborator Carly Rae Jepsen's work. Paper Rings, another cute poppy track, has a rockabilly punky vibe to it. But really, songs like Death by a Thousand Cuts definitely broke his mold. Between the guitar riff, odd warbling synths, and church bells, Antonoff really does experiment here on Lover. He's delivered some of his most varied songs on this album. Cornelia Street, The Archer, and Daylight are ballads that use synths to create atmosphere and a sense of heaviness through the instrumentals. Songs like The Archer are key examples of Antonoff and Swift playing with their traditional song structures. With an alternate production, lyrically speaking, The Archer would fit perfectly fine on Folklore. Perhaps the most distinct of Antonoff's productions on Lover is False God, a jazzy cut that chops up Taylor's voice and builds the song around a single saxophone. Joel Little co-produced 4 tracks, including the now infamous lead single Me. Swift had met Little at a concert and then met up with him again in New Zealand during her rep tour. One thing that I have to note is that Little's production with Swift, from the shouty Miss Americana to the click-clack of The Man to the cascade of echoes and You Need to Calm Down, they all added a new texture to Swift's sound. I always question why Joel Little's contributions made up 3 out of the 5 singles, but it's very clear that Swift enjoyed their time together. Last but not least, Bell and Dukes, best known for their work with Post Malone, who's going to appear on Tortured Poets Department, produced 3 tracks, 4 if you count the droplet, All of the Girls You Loved Before. Each of their contributions feels very distinct. I Forgot You Existed opens the album with simple snaps and piano chords and vocal layers. Afterglow sees Swift employ her falsetto and thumping bass. That song always felt like a femme take on Posty's sad boy anthems. And of course, the Megan anthem, It's Nice to Have a Friend, mixing a choir, harp, steel drums, a trumpet solo, and church bells all together. What Lover lacks in cohesion, it has in variety. I always found that Folklore and Evermore would not exist without the Lover experimentation happening. Let's talk about marketing Lover, because the marketing campaign was insane. With the album coming together, Swift more or less formed an antithetical aesthetic to Reputation's dark black and white, borderline gothic vibes. Lover leaned into bright pastel and femme-polished millennial energy. The cover itself resembles something that would be formed by a Tumblr fan rather than a proper album cover. The cover sees Swift with blue hair tips, a heart of glitter over her eyes, in a sea of pink clouds. At one point, this record was supposed to be titled Daylight, but Swift settled on Lover because it encompassed the record's themes better. Lover would be presented as a love letter to love itself in different forms: platonic, romantic, familial, communal, and towards oneself. This was a more abstract idea than 1989 and Reputation's more focus-centered narratives. Swift teased the upcoming record with Instagram posts as well as a butterfly mural that appeared in Nashville. Swift would reveal the song's title and music video release date at the 2019 NFL Draft, which in hindsight is ironic considering her connection to the NFL nowadays. I'll never forget staying up that night and seeing the pink snake turn into butterflies. Me with Brendan Urie is arguably one of the most polarizing Taylor Swift singles to date. Critics were split on whether or not this was a camp classic or her worst song ever. Even I made a semi-critical video about it. Defending Taylor on that day was insane. I mean, one fan even spoiled Avengers Endgame infamously. Still, the song would go on to break a record for the highest jump on the Billboard Hot 100 from 100 to 2. The song was blocked from the summit by Old Town Road. 2019 was particularly competitive, and Swift pulled out all the stops to get me to the top: multiple vinyls, digital copies, remixes, signed CDs, but her streaming game just was not organized enough in hindsight. It's a testament to Taylor Swift's standards that a comeback song that peaked at 2 would be considered a flop. As discussed in my first Midnights video, her strategy of releasing her weakest but poppiest song on the record as a lead wasn't gonna fly anymore. But still, the fact that she was able to chart Me that high in 2019 was impressive. On June 13th, Swift revealed the cover of the record and its title on an Instagram Live that only had 145,000 peak viewership, a modest number compared to the millions that she'd draw going on live right now. The album was announced for August 23rd, which added up equaled 13. Where Reputation saw her in media blackout mode, Lover saw her open up the gates again. Taylor would go on just about every major program, interview all the big magazines again. She conducted secret sessions that she did for 1989 and Reputation. Amazon would print boxes with the cover art on it. Capital One released their first ever ad with Swift this era. I argue that this is actually one of her biggest traditional rollouts. You Need to Calm Down, the second single off the record, was also released that night. This pro-LGBTQ bop was dropped in the midst of Pride Month. Taylor herself would advocate for Congress to pass the Equality Act and would later release a star-studded music video which officially saw the end of her rumored feud with Katy Perry. Unfortunately, like Me, You Need to Calm Down also received mixed reviews, with some praising Swift's messaging and the song's catchiness, while others viewing it as a bewildering or underwhelming song. And it would peak at number 2, blocked by Old Town Road. Swift would tie Madonna's record for the most number 2s on the Hot 100. All that being said, the song did do a lot of good. It led to a spike in GLAAD donations. It has even become a Pride Month staple in some of the bars that I go to. It has a positive legacy. At the end of June, it was announced that her former label, Big Machine, had sold her masters to Scooter Braun, leading Swift to denounce Braun as a bully and eventually resolve to start the Taylor's Versions re-recordings. July was an exciting month that saw Swift headline the Amazon Prime Day concert. Later that month, Swift would release The Archer, track 5 off the record, as teased in the You Need to Calm Down music video. It debuted at 69 and was praised as a return to form for Swift by those who were underwhelmed by the first 2 singles. The title track would be released as the last single before the album dropped. Lover, a charming country waltz ballad, would capture hearts with its tender verses and brilliant vow-like bridge. The Lover house in the music video, with each of its rooms capturing her eras up until that point, would become one of Swift's most emblematic symbols to date. Lover would peak at 10, earn a Song of the Year Grammy nomination, and become one of her most signature songs. Now we're going to talk about the album's release and its legacy since then. The album dropped on August 23rd. Critically, it was Swift's most acclaimed record at the time, with a 79 Metacritic score. Yes, this was before Swift's work was re-evaluated and scored by critics less concerned about her personal life. Most of the praise was leveled at the tenderness and intimacy of the record. At the time, many did consider it her most grown-up record to date. The album's length and the diverse soundscape was a more mixed response, with some calling it free and others calling it unfocused. As I mentioned in my first Midnights video, I always believed that Lover should have been cut to a cleaner 13-track album with a deluxe version. Midnights employed that strategy alongside better single choices, leading to better overall reception and arguably its own Album of the Year win. Lover would still go on to land on some of the year-end lists and debuted to 867,000 units, outselling all 199 other albums that one week. It did mark the end of a 4-album streak that started with Speak Now and ended with Reputation, for Taylor selling 1 million US units in its debut week. Swift would go on to promote Lover in a one-off concert in the City of Love, Paris, in September before announcing Loverfest, which was cancelled by the pandemic. Taylor would sweep at the AMAs, performing a medley of her hits to accept the Artist of the Decade award and protest her master's issue. Lover itself was nominated for Best Pop Vocal Album at the Grammys, with some of its singles also nominated. It lost all of its categories though. In January, Taylor would debut The Man, which was the final single at the time, with a very cool self-directed music video where she starred as Tyler Swift, a male version of herself. Netflix would premiere Miss Americana, a documentary covering the creation of Lover itself. It shared some pretty interesting candid moments, such as the formation of the Getaway Car Bridge, Swift's disappointment in Reputation being snubbed, and how excited she was to make the song Me. An outtake, Only the Young, was released alongside the movie, a tribute to future activists and encouragement for fans to be more aware about the issues. Allegedly, Cruel Summer was meant to be a single at some point to support the incoming Loverfest, but due to the pandemic and Folklore's development, the Lover era ended without much closure, so we thought. It's pretty ironic because Swift did say in the documentary that she felt like this was her last chance to be a pop star. And we all saw what happened. She really rose again. After 2 outtakes off Lover leaked, Swift would kick off the Eras Tour by dropping All of the Girls You Loved Before, which peaked at 12. Cruel Summer, which had served as the second track on the setlist for the tour, went viral on TikTok. Republic would capitalize on this by releasing it to radio, and it eventually did redeem this era by becoming its first #1 hit 4 years after its release. A true testament itself to Taylor Swift's power and Lover as well. Today, Lover continues to captivate Swifties around the world, serving as a prelude to Swift's resurgence as the world's foremost pop star. Lover was a messy era, but as time passed, it has come to become a roadmap for her. She learned from her shortcomings, reaffirmed her craft, and created a solid pop record that still is charting hits to this day. And now, here comes the album commentary. Before I discuss each track, I did want to point out observations that I had about the album's usage of voice and its themes. Lover is unique in how Swift utilizes her voice quite literally. Sure, she speaks about feminism, equality, and politics for the first time in many of these songs, but vocally, this was a very adventurous record. There is a lot of layering and sampling and chopping of her vocals. For the first time, Swift really does use her own voice as an instrument the entire record. You hear it in You Need to Calm Down's echoes, the way that she pushes herself on Afterglow, the harmonies in Death by a Thousand Cuts. While Swift has her amazing belts on Don't Blame Me, instrumentation and production almost felt like a shield over Swift's vocals on Reputation. Lover strips it down to the point where she is front and center. Swift experiments with delivery, showing a range over different genres, trying on rock in some, R&B in others, but it's all united by her songwriting. This album contains some of the most gorgeous layering and vocal production that she's ever done. Even on a track that I don't like so much, like Me, you get a very satisfying vocal texture. The way that she punctuates herself, it almost feels like a live recording. The title track in particular, the background vocals are just immaculate. I adore the technical prowess that Swift, Antonoff, and the rest of the production team had. It's a very clean record. Thematically, I've come to really appreciate Lover. I still argue that Reputation's a far more conventionally romantic and focused story, but Lover covers love that we don't sing about oftentimes. Sure, there are some heartwarming tracks, but tracks like Soon You'll Get Better, which deals with an ill loved one, or even Me with its self-love slant, feel very refreshing. The Archer is a song about how hard it can be to love yourself or to trust others to love you. Even the more romantic tracks themselves contain nuance. Cruel Summer's devastating and uncertain. Paper Rings speaks to the real ups and downs despite being peppy. Cornelia Street's tragic, sentimental plea to hoping that love never ends is just heartbreaking. Lover is a thematically rich playground of ideas that never quite form one single story, but they all hit individually. I did notice that wedding imagery pops up from Lover's Bridge to Paper Rings to It's Nice to Have a Friend's ending, which makes this a tragic prelude to Midnight's rejection of the institution. And of course, because some of you will be annoying in the comments, this album does cover a period of her relationship to Joe Alwyn, but again, the songs are so much bigger than him and the time that they spent together. Lover feels like a living snapshot of Swift's life, all of the corners of her existence up until that point in plain daylight, the final track itself feeling akin to an exorcism of self-imposed darkness. She ends the record saying, "You are what you love," and Lover is a collection of what she loves, ideas, dreams, the people in her life, her stories, and herself. It's a very brave and stunning record. I Forgot You Existed is a breezy opener that sheds the urgency of her usual opener for a brisk shrug. There is a glib, casual side to Taylor here that I really like. She name drops In My Feelings by Drake, the pre-chorus is a one simple line, and the chorus is so whatever in the best way. I like that she repeats some of the lines 3 times in the verses. Verse 2's lines about how she would have stuck around for her ex, how she would have fought the whole town, been front row to a show, it's a very universal feeling because we've all been there. We've had a friend or a partner that just wasn't really reliable. I adore the sentiment of it isn't love, it isn't hate, it's just indifference. The delivery rolls off the tongue so well, and it does pack a punch because indifference is the worst thing you can give to someone. Cruel Summer I made a whole video about. I'll link it here, but the long story short is that this is her pop magnum opus. It is a masterwork that's short, bittersweet, and catchy. It's about the turmoil one faces in a situationship, the anxiety, the euphoria that you get running through the ups and downs. Lover itself is Taylor's best title track to date. It is one of her most romantic songs, a literal waltz that you could score weddings to decades from now. A Secret Session listener said that this was Taylor's all-time favorite written song at the time of that session. From its Antonoffian production to the visuals of the video, dancing in a snow globe, it really is a sequel of sorts to You Are in Love from 1989. I could go line by line to pick out highlights, but it's really lyrics like Have I Known You for 20 Seconds or 20 Years that just keep me hooked. And let's talk about that bridge. It's one of her best. It's Imaginary Wedding Vows. The rhyme scheme is just so organic. You can hear her saying this. My heart's been borrowed and yours has been blue codifies her lover as blue. Swear to be overdramatic and true circles back to Endgame's line about the drama loving her, and that tiny detail of the dirtiest jokes really humanizes who she's singing about. The way that she ends that bridge saying lover right after seat is one of her most unique vocal deliveries. I felt like the chorus itself really mashes all of her old motifs, Forever and Ever being a callback to both New Year's Day and Forever and Always lines, Take Me Home from Style, the repetition of My being from Mary's song, and echoed in Death by a Thousand Cuts is a masterclass of writing that I thought deserved the Grammy. The Man is a refreshing track that sees Taylor's sardonic pen come out. This is really a song that you can tell she wanted to write her entire life, and she does point out that if she was a man, majority of what people hate her for, whether it's being a serial dater or a savvy businesswoman, no one would hate her for it. Everything is fair game, even when people were criticizing her for dating men younger than her, hence the Leo and Saint-Tropez line. The chorus rhyme scheme, again, is very simplistic, so it lets you register what she's saying. The use of sampled vocals and the pure heroine-like mechanic production is really neat. I really dug the bridge's melodic switch up and the casual use of bitch, because it felt very sharp for 2019 Taylor. The second half of that bridge is just her saying, I can't flaunt it, so I am allowed to be mad. And while some people do call this song trite and Feminism 101, I do feel like it's something that some people did need to hear. The Archer is one of her best track vibes, prototypical to the folklorian introspection that she would do later on. This song serves as a reference to Swift's Sagittarius zodiac sign. I really like that the first verse plays with the duality of love is war. The line cruelty wins in the movies draws a line to songs like If This Was a Movie and even the one-off folklore. The pre-chorus is all very, but the help me hold on to you line is particularly devastating. It ties back to New Year's Day and You're Losing Me. Relationships are built on mutual work, and it's very clear that Swift wants to do the work, but this lover isn't giving her the space to. The second verse feels like a summary of the Reputation era from its Dark Side line. to how the revenge narrative was akin to cutting off her nose to spite her face. The bridge is haunting in its doomed repetition. It almost sounds like a panic attack in how she drones on it. The chorus itself feels like a late-night rumination. She's been on all sides of war and she wonders who could really love her for that. She ends on "You Could Stay," which is a very pointed note towards her lover and us, the audience. It's a very underrated metatextual track. I Think He Knows is utter fun, and one of Jack's more playful productions that really felt like an extension of his work on Carly Rae's Dedicated. It's ironic coming straight from The Archer because this is a song about quiet confidence. The man that she's singing about has this boyish look that she wants, she's feeling like a teenager again, and she knows that he might know that she wants him. "I Won't Stick Around Cause Good Ones Never Wait" reaffirms that she has control over the situation. The second pre-chorus shows that he's obsessed with her, and she has the confidence to go, well, yes. The bridges on Lover Again are the best part of this album. The imagery of her driving, the reiteration of blue as her lover's color, and her asking him if he knows where to go. It's the vulnerability of this album that I really love. The closing "I Want You, Bless My Souls," those are addictive, but they come from a place of truth. Miss Americana and the Heartbreak Prince is one of the darker, enigmatic tracks. Little's production really gives this a coming-of-age feel, which works for the high school setting. Verse 2 really hones in on American politics. She's captured the anxiety that people had during the 2018 midterms so well. The pre-chorus itself really does set the tone for the powerful chorus. "You play stupid games, you win stupid prizes" is one of my favorite lines. "So sad we paint the town blue, voted most likely to run away with you." And that last line is a clever double entendre about her own politics. The bridge pulls us back into the football game metaphor with an earworm, but I feel like the message of finding someone to escape the disillusionment of the political landscape, it does register, but it is a bit clunky. While Only the Young was more on the nose, I feel like this one gets a little bit lost in its metaphors, even if it did slay as the opener on the Eras tour. Paper Rings is an underrated personal favorite of mine between its hopeless romantic tone to the iconic Swiftie key change. I feel like the sentiment of "I'd marry you with paper rings" is just so sweet, and the line "I hate accidents except when we went from friends to this," that's goals right there. It's grounded, it's real, it's lived in. Each verse speaks to things that people universally experience when dating. The pre-chorus really reminded me of the rockabilly call and response kind of model of songwriting, and the numbers do add up to 13, which is a nice touch, but it's really the bridge that gets me. It's a very sweet 90s rom-com sounding bridge. It's giving iCarly theme song. It's just well-constructed pastel pink pop punk. We don't get enough of these days. If this song came out in the 2000s, we would be seeing this used in so many rom-coms. Just a sweet song. Cornelia Street is probably the best known deep cut for a good reason. It's a bittersweet nostalgic look into Swift's early relationship stages with Alwyn. The imagery of being in the backseat ties into Cruel Summer's sort of lines. The chorus is just everything. The idea of never walking Cornelia Street ever again because the heartbreak could never mend is just really cutting. One idea in Lover that I really like is that the city has become something of an emblem between the love that she shares with her lover, and she's terrified that he'll walk away. It really changes what the city means to her, and 1989 establishes that the city is her home and her identity. I find that the structure of the song is a little bit odd because the pre-chorus comes in late to tie in with her card shark story to reveal that he showed his hand. The bridge itself continues Swift's comparison of love to religion, an idea that has permeated throughout her work but is codified in this specific album. We hear windshield wipers at the very end to give us the feeling that we're really in the car with her. The chords and structure of the song are mimicked in You're Losing Me. Death by a Thousand Cuts is a more straightforward breakup anthem inspired by a dream Swift had after watching a Netflix movie, Someone Great. At the time, this was more of an inspired scenario based on other people's stories and not her own, which makes this proto-folklorian much like other tracks on this record. Antonoff's production is unique yet nightmarish. The repetition of my's and for's oddly parallel those in Lovers. The chorus is pretty dark, referencing getting drunk, and it paints this image of a house not being a home and decaying. The structure is wonky in that there's only really one verse, one chorus, another career-high bridge, and then another chorus and a post-chorus. The rhythm of the bridge evokes that of a mental breakdown, touching on the parallel fours again. at the start with heart, hips, body, love, and then time, wine, spirit, and trust. The dark symmetry of all of this feels cinematic yet ranty. The outro reiterates the opening, much like Cornelia Street ends, which I find fascinating because one is rooted more in fact, and this one is more of a dark fantasy. London Boy is one of those tracks that I personally would have cut off the standard. It's short, it's sweet, the production is interesting, but it doesn't go anywhere narratively. It's sugary, bubblegum pop that has some cool hooks in it, but it paints a caricature of London culture the same way Ed Sheeran's Galway Girl does for Galway. Aside from being sweet and a Stella McCartney shoutout, it's a chop. Soon You'll Get Better with the Chicks is a personal track about her own mother dealing with cancer. She contemplated not putting this track on the record, but she kept it on, even performing it live during a COVID relief show in 2020. Each verse is just ripped straight out of a memory, and that bridge never fails to get me to cry. However, it is my least played Taylor Swift song just because of how hard it is to listen to, especially if you've ever had a family going through a health issue like that. False God continues this love is a religion motif throughout the entire record. It's a very abstract song. I like the usage of the ocean metaphor consistently. The winding nature of the pre-chorus where she compares herself to New York City, it does speak again to that idea that the city has become a symbol of her love and herself. And that chorus, it's one of Swift's most sensual to date. She doesn't care if love is a false god, they'll still worship it. The altar is my hips is one of the most risque lines I've ever heard her say. I was shocked that she dropped this. Sonically and lyrically, it was pushing boundaries and has become a favorite deep cut of mine. You Need to Calm Down is a hot mess, and I mean this in the most complimentary way. I'd cut it myself just on the merits that it feels and sounds like an alien had come down to Earth on Pride Month and made a song about it. It's well intended, and some of the lines like shade has never made anybody less gay, they're insanely funny, but just utterly messy. Its production itself almost feels out of this world, like a fish out of water, which I do think is a cool detail, and the music video itself does redeem the song for me just because it's visually entertaining. But sometimes it'll come on, or sometimes I'll see it and I'll be like, I cannot believe this is real. Afterglow is one of my favorite deep cuts just on how honest and raw the lyrics are. We really see Taylor take the blame here and the onus on why the relationship is failing. The verses really exonerate her lover, while the pre-chorus sees her use metaphor to try and rationalize why she's acting the way she is. The chorus is where she says, hey, it's all me in my head, I'm the one who burned us down. It's a very clean apology inviting this lover into the afterglow. The bridge itself is a very honest plea, simple, clean, before one final chorus. It's just a well-constructed, simple pop song. Me has grown on me over the years, but as the adage goes, if you don't have anything nice to say, just don't say it at all. But I will say some nice things. The horns, the production remain some of her most fun and vibrant to date. I did like the performances that she did with Brendan Urie. Bringing in the drums and the band and all that stuff is pretty neat. It's Nice to Have a Friend is an adorable childhood friends to lover story. It really does sound like a very sweet daydream that one has about a life that they've never lived. Verse 1 is about school days and just hanging out and playing video games, while verse 2 speaks to the young adult days. Curfew is gone, they've kept contact, and one day someone makes the move and is brave. The instrumental bridge feels like a passage of time before we jump to church bells and staying in bed. The hate for this track is overblown. I think it's a keeper, and the production is just extremely dreamy. I love the varied use of instruments, the steel drums, and the trumpet solo is just amazing. Daylight is the closer of the album, and one of her best closers in my honest opinion. It really does tie together a lot of the loose ends and themes of the record. Each verse really speaks to the journey that she's taken throughout her life. And that really does set up the chorus's payoff in that she's been sleeping through this 20-year daylight. Note that I believe that the 20s here is not a literal 20 years, but her years in her 20s. And now she sees the light. The song structure is very interesting because the pre-chorus only shows up once, and it really does paint this idea that her and her lover have been through it, but they set it aside because she only wants to see and think of him. That bridge is one of her best yet. It's an answer to the sadness of red and All Too Well. Used to think that love was black and white or burning red, but now it's golden. That color was highlighted throughout the entire Reputation era. And the spoken outro really speaks to how she wants to be defined by the things that she loves. You are what you love becomes the thesis to this record. Overall, all of my views on Lover have fluctuated over the years, but 5 years separated from the record and a lifetime essentially, I've really come to love love this record. It's definitely not a 10 for me, but I do think that it's closer to an 8.1 out of 10, and higher if we do pare it down to a cleaner 13-track listing. It's very much the yin to Midnight's yang, and I cannot wait to see how her future work interplays with this record. I imagine that Tortured Poets Department will parallel it, considering its rumored subject matter and the back cover. Lover is immortalized by how messy it was, but in reality, it was really a reflection of an artist that was finding herself artistically, business-wise, just all around finding herself, and I'm glad that Lover was a buffer era for Taylor to recalibrate and figure out who she was going to be beyond a pop artist. That self-exploration is why she is who she is today. And that's a wrap. Thank you so much for tuning in to my Lover video essay. A lot of you guys have been asking me to make longer video essays. I am just a succinct person, you know, it takes me a bit to stretch things out. But honestly, being able to meander and relish in thoughts is something that I do want to train myself to do. As a writer, it makes me a better video essayist and a better thinker, so I will listen to that. Quick shout out to my subscribers and my members. Thank you so much for being loyal to this channel over the years. Whether or not you're new or you've been here since 5 years ago, thank you so much for tuning into my channel. I've always wanted to make a proper Lover video essay. My review for it, that was very informal and I didn't have the music, so being able to edit a proper video essay and a retrospective on it means a lot to me, and I feel like it helps complete my Taylor series. So again, thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope to see you next video.